Hi folks, it's Switchback. Whether it's for hiking, backpacking, or trail running, the right trail running shoes will make or break your time on the trail. If you want to know more about using trail running shoes for hiking or backpacking, then click up here. I have been on the trail my whole life, and I've been a trail runner for well over 10 years. I also am a total gear junkie, and I used to sell shoes at REI. So let's talk about how to get the right trail running shoes for you. First of all, no one shoe is right for everyone. Even if shoe X, whatever that is the one that you hear about in all the forums and everybody's talking about it and it's what you see all the thru hikers wearing, still doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the right one for you. Everyone's feet are a little different, and there is just no physical way for any one shoe to work for absolutely everyone. For example, a very popular shoe among thru hikers especially is the Ultra Lone Peak. And I had a pair of the threes, if that tells you how long ago I used them. And unfortunately for me, they gave me plantar fasciitis. However, for some people, it cures their plantar fasciitis. So it just goes to show how everyone is different. And yes, I did ease my way into them. If at all possible, go and get yourself fitted and have a gait assessment at a local running store like Fleet Feet or Roadrunner Sports or whatever is local for your area. It's always good to support small businesses and big box stores. They can measure your feet, but they really don't have a lot of the same assessment skills and abilities that a lot of these smaller stores can really offer. It's also a good idea to get sized periodically, even if you were just sized a year or two ago. For me, for example, a lot of the shoes I bought 2 years ago, unfortunately, don't work for me anymore. Yay, getting older. Thru hikers often have their feet change significantly over the course of a thru hike, even growing a size or two. So it's really important to get fitted each time to make sure that it's still going to be the right shoe for you, even if your current pair is still fitting you because it's also probably stretched out to your current foot. Always try on your footwear, whatever it is, whether it's trail running shoes or boots or whatever, with the socks that you actually plan to wear with those shoes, because of course each different pair of socks is going to fit those shoes differently. So imagine wearing your boot socks trying on heels. It doesn't work. So you want to make sure that you're wearing the right footwear and the right socks and match the two so that you're going to replicate that real world experience. If you're unable to get to a store for whatever reason, then consider ordering from a store that has a really good return policy, somewhere like REI, where as of filming this, they will return anything for up to a year for any reason. And that even includes if you've tried them out on the trail to make sure that they work for you. Some brands run large, some run small, some run true to size, some wide, some narrow. They're all just different. You may need to read through some reviews, some forums to kind of figure out what brand is what. And keep in mind within that different models are going to fit differently, even within the same brand. But just to give you a few specific examples, Ultras and Topos both tend to have a very wide toe box in general. Salomon, Innovate, and La Sportiva all tend to run very narrow, although, for example, the Speed Cross comes in a wide, and that works very well for me, and that's a Salomon shoe. Hoka One tends to work very well for people with very high arches. For me, the arch drives me absolutely batty. And oftentimes with trail running shoes, you're going to want to go up a half a size from your normal size. Now, when you're actually trying the shoes on, put the shoe on and loosen the laces completely. Then tap your toes into the very end of the shoe and put your foot down without adjusting back into the shoe. You should be able to fit one finger easily behind your heel, but it should be touching your foot and the shoe. If it's difficult to wedge your finger in there, you need to go up a size. And if it's very roomy back there, then you need to go down a size. Now readjust your foot comfortably and go ahead and lace up. The heel should feel fairly snug and should not slip. The midsole should feel snug, not loose, but also not have pressure anywhere in particular. If the arch bothers you while you're trying it on, it's really going to bother you on the trail. Your toes should be able to move, and there should be about a thumbnail's width of room between your toes and the end of the shoe. If you can feel the end of the shoe, it's definitely too small. A few tips for troubleshooting. If you have bunions, you may get pain or pressure by the big toe or at the pinky toe. Consider a wider toe box. Thinner socks may also help. If you get blisters on your toes, you can try toe socks, but for me personally, they actually make it worse. Don't ask me why. Again, Everyone's different, but try different things, see what works for you. You can also try an anti-chafe or something like Trail Toes, which is basically like a gel that you can put in between your toes. Again, the right socks make all the difference, and you're just gonna have to experiment and see what works for you. For me, for trail running, I really like Belega Hidden Comfort No-Show socks. And for hiking, I really like the Darn Tough Hiker Micro Crew Cushion socks. Again, these are what work for me. You may have to experiment to see what works best for you. If you have toes jamming into the toe of your foot, then you may want to try what's called a runner's loop, which is a lacing technique, and that can help reduce your foot sliding forward in the shoe. This is, of course, assuming that everything else about the shoe fits. If you're getting heel slippage, the same lacing technique can help. If that's not enough, then a padded sock can help take up some of that volume. But if those don't do it, you may just have to try a different style of shoe that has a narrower heel cup. And this is an example of two different styles of heel cups right here. So obviously a little wider and narrower. This is going to be less likely to slip. If you're getting pressure in the midfoot, which is in this area, then you may want to try window lacing. And that helps to relieve pressure in that exact area. So you're going to leave a gap in the lacing where you're feeling that pressure. If that's not sufficient to relieve that pressure, then you may need to try a wide fit or a different insole. So what exactly should you expect from your shoes? Your trail shoes should provide traction and protection. When you compare them to road running shoes, for example, you're going to see more aggressive lugs to give you more traction, and they're going to vary greatly from one shoe to the next. But the rubber that's used is also grippy in order to help protect and keep you on a rock. Vibram in particular, they make the soles for these shoes, and they're gonna have extra sticky rubber. Even just feeling the difference in these, I can feel that this one is more slippery than this one here, but this has a more aggressive lug. Also, some shoes are going to have the lugs more spaced apart so they don't hold on to mud the same way. Now on the upper, you're going to often see some kind of reinforced toe to help protect against rocks and roots and other things that you're going to trip over and that you're going to hit against your foot and your toes. You'll also have abrasion resistant materials, and it's not going to be resistant completely, but it's going to have more protection against rocks and roots and other things that you're going to rub against as you're running versus if you were on a road where you're really not going to have a lot of obstacles and things that are going to get caught on your foot. These materials are often also going to breathe and drain very well, unless you have a waterproof, but that's something we'll talk about in a minute too. Some of them even come with a rock plate, and what that means is that there's a very stiff piece of plastic in the midsole here, and that way if you step on a root or a rock or something like that there, it helps distribute that weight over the whole foot as opposed to having all of it right on that midsole. And that can really help protect your feet from getting as sore, especially if you're doing something like rock hopping, which I've done and definitely done it without having that rock plate, and it makes a difference. Some people find the weight of the shoes more important than others, especially somebody who's doing, say, ultra distance running. I am personally of the mind that comfort is more important than weight when it comes to a trail running shoe because the weight difference in them is pretty negligible, but not everybody shares that opinion. Most companies will list the weight of the shoes online, but you may have to adjust for whatever size they're using for that because it may not be your size. Of course, there are lots of different things that make different shoes different from one another. One of them is cushioning, and you will see minimalist, maximalist, and everything in between. A barefoot or minimalist shoe will make you feel a lot more of what's underneath you. This is often referred to as being responsive. Some people really like this, some don't, and there's of course a spectrum between those. It's really entirely up to you. There is, of course, also less shock absorbency with this. So your body will be taking more of that force and that impact as you're running along or walking, but also you can feel the ground better, which keeps you more balanced. And so there is definitely a trade-off. The thicker your cushioning, the less you're going to feel the ground. You do want to feel it to some degree for stability. So try different amounts of cushioning when you're trying on shoes and see what feels right for you. This is a big reason I don't like using hiking boots for hiking hiking because it's harder for me to maintain my balance when I really can't feel the ground underneath me. If you're going for shorter hikes and shorter runs, you may be happier with less cushioning, but if you're going long, you're probably going to want a little bit more. You may also see in the listing for a shoe the stability. So this will be like neutral, stability shoes, support, but this tends to be a lot less important when it comes to trail shoes than it is with road shoes, where on a road run, there is no variety of terrain really. You're going on a flat surface that's pretty constant, versus if you're on a trail, you're going over dirt and rocks and roots and God knows what else. And you're going to be shifting your weight a lot, and sometimes walking and sometimes running, and it's going to vary. That stability has a lot more to do with how your foot moves when you move. And this may be more important depending on where you have pain or other complaints. And this goes back to that gait analysis that we talked about. You may have heard about zero drop shoes. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you may not know what that means. So the heel to toe drop, or drop as it may just be referred to, is the stack height difference between the heel and the toe. When most people run, especially road running in particular, they will land on their heel more. That's called a heel strike. And so you need that added cushioning when you are walking that way or running that way. And having a taller heel will give you more cushion for that impact. Now, a zero drop shoe is going to be the same height in the toes and the heels. So there's zero drop from here to here. The idea behind that is that it's going to promote what's called a forefoot or midfoot strike. So you're either landing with your whole foot or with more of the front of your foot, kind of almost running with your toes. Part of the benefit of that is that you're usually landing with a softer knee versus a straight knee if you're heel striking. Now, I tend to be a midfoot runner, but I still got plantar fasciitis after using zero drop shoes. A 4 or 5 millimeter drop has been great for me, and sometimes more, like with the Salomon Speed Cross, which I think is a 12 millimeter drop, which is a huge drop. Most of them are 12 millimeters or 10 millimeters, but a lot of shoes are going down to 5. These ones are a 4 millimeter. But you will just have to experiment and see what works best for your body and your feet. Another consideration is whether to get waterproof or Gore-Tex shoes. Gore-Tex is simply a brand name for one of the waterproof barriers out there. I personally have never had a situation where I wished I had waterproof trail running shoes. Some people like them for winter trail runs or for light rain, but for me, I've been so much happier with good drainage. And if it's pouring rain or there are puddles, your feet are going to get wet either way. And frankly, if you're walking or running or hiking or whatever, you're probably also sweating. You want that to be able to breathe. And I personally, again, I have run, I have hiked, I have backpacked in wet and muddy conditions and even snowy conditions. And if, unless I'm wearing my snowshoes and I really need some turbo boots, I really am so much happier when my footwear can breathe and dry out. Even my waterproof boots, not my winter boots, but my Merrell Moabs, they eventually wet out, and then it takes longer for them to dry than my non-waterproof Moabs. But of course, it's all personal preference, and your mileage may vary, no pun intended. In any case, if you need to dry out your footwear, take out the insoles and throw some newspaper in your shoes if you need to. And speaking of insoles, you may also want to look at aftermarket insoles. There are way too many varieties of these for me to get into that here, but insoles may make the difference between a good shoe and the perfect shoe, or even between a shoe not working and being exactly right for you. And this is where getting fitted really does help. How often should you be replacing your trail running shoes? This is going to vary greatly between the person, the shoes, the amount of wear, the kind of terrain, your weight, and your preferences. If your feet are starting to bother you earlier in a hike or a run than they normally might, or the lugs have worn down completely, or you're really able to press in right in here, if you can really get in there, it's definitely time to replace those shoes. On a personal note, Mountain Goat and I are big hikers and trail runners, but we have completely different feet. So we have very different shoes that work for each of us. I have very flat and very wide feet. And so a few models that have worked for me are the Brooks Cascadia, Topo Ultra Ventures, and Salomon Speed Cross in wide. A few models that have worked for her, she has high volume feet and very high arches. and she likes the Hoka Speed Goat, the Brooks Caldera, and Saucony Exodus. And I'll include links to those and several other popular models below. Now, if you've enjoyed this in-depth buying guide, then check out more of my buying guides in this playlist here. Thank you so much for watching. If you've gotten value, like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.